Hi all, this is my podcast for the Integrated Project Communication course. My topic of the podcast is staying mentally healthy during studies. Funnily enough, we already touched this when it was my time to do the small group discussions. But anyway, as the time is limited and I've got 20 minutes, I'll go on to topic and I'll explain the structure of this podcast briefly and what I've excluded in this kind of examination. So, I'm looking mental health from the perspective of a student and from the perspective of maintaining physiological health, how I view the current relentless productivity, which is praised nowadays in our society, versus unplugged recovery. So, on the other hand, we've got the idea and ideal in society that we should work relentlessly. But on the other hand, we've got the unplugged recovery, which means we are we are idle, we are at our hobbies, and we are not connected to our work or studies. Then I'll attack the infinite scroll problem that we have, and I think each of us is subject to brain rotting or doom scrolling. To those who don't know those terms, it's the endless social media scrolling. And that's a problem because that affects our attention spans. But we'll get to that. And last but not least, I'm discussing the ways to mitigate, for example, the lack of attention and how to increase discipline. Um, a bit about the structure. So first, I'll go a little bit into references that I have in this podcast because online there are great research about attention span, but also there is so much good content about psychology and how to stay disciplined in studies. Then I'll so that's the first topic. Second is how to handle stress. Third, how to recover from school or work. Fourth, this is my kind of rage segment where I'm allowing myself to get a little bit angry because I'm discussing brain rot. Then fifth, the tools, like I shortly said in the summary of this podcast, uh, and the how to perceive discipline and what are the steps that you need to take in order to, well, maybe quite possibly get your attention span back on track. But to the references, and these are important. Uh, Keep listening because these had a profound effect on me and thereby this podcast. I watched or I am using these 5 videos that I watched on YouTube. They're also, if you're watching the video, they're here. So, realistic college advice for unmotivated students. That's from Arpi Park. It's the core video of this podcast and what has kept me intact during the 5 years that I've now studied. both in Germany and in Finland. Then 2, what the actual science says about brain rot. That's from Howtown, the YouTube channel. Then 3, you need to be bored by Arthur Brooks and Harvard University. 4, from Simon Ong, the video called I'm 40. If you're in your 20s or 30s, watch this. And then there's a bonus video from Arpi Park, which is about surprise, surprise, attention, addiction, aura, and ads. But I'll not discuss that because it's going sidetracked. So, what the realist college advice for unmotivated students encompasses is, and which is the most important video concerning this podcast, is the advice, just literal advice for students that sometimes or most of the time lack motivation to study. And the advice that he gave is basically try to not be lazy. So for example, don't stay at home if you find it hard to study at home. Remember what college is. Or university. It's a place for studying. Routines are important, and that's why you should always set rigid routines and time schedules in your calendar, because those help you study. Fourth advice was use substances, and by that he, Arpi Park, and also me mean caffeine. So if you have energy, then you're more prone to do stuff. Then number 5, you will eventually multitask. For example, listen to a YouTube video and study at the same time. But you should do it so that you multitask with something that you already know. Like, for example, if you have watched South Park already 2 times, then you can set it as kind of background noise. The number 6, don't be a bad student, because simply being a bad student, so being lazy and playing video games up until midnight, that's not cool anymore in university. And number 7, time is money, and the time you spend studying is much more valuable than the time you spend doing useless stuff. And by useless, I don't mean things regarding recovery. I wanted to discuss, and I used these few minutes to discuss this video because it has been such an important video for me, and I suggest you check it out. But moving on, and to briefly discuss the other references. So Howtown had a great video about brain rot and the science about it, so how science has studied it. Then Harvard University and Arthur Brooks, in the video You Need to Be Bored, they discussed how to improve life quality, and shortly put, take breaks from your phones. And then from Simon On, I'm 40, if you're in your 20s or 30s, watch this. It's just general advice, almost like the from Arpi Park, but much broader and much more detailed. And if you're watching the video, you can see the highlighted advice that I brought up from that video that concerns students, such as be present. So if you're at a lecture, concentrate to the lecture and be present, because you have set out time to go there and possibly focus and learn things. So you should do that. But uh, those videos still didn't really, in my opinion, address stress, which is a very underlying problem in nowadays students' life, because nowadays it feels like everyone in university has their turbos on, turbojets or ramjets on, and we are expected to do boatloads of work in short amounts of time, especially with with AI, because AI has increased productivity, but it also has increased the demands of uh, individual skills. And to that I say that you need to find something else in your life than than study than studies, and you need to make time for it. For example, hobbies, because that helps you recover from the stress. And stress, with stress I mean in this case bad stress that hurts you and it feels like you have a stone in your heart. And that's not good stress. Having proper breaks is one of the most important things in daily life to mitigate bad stress. And by good break, I, just like Arthur Brooks from Harvard, means is taking breaks without phone, going for a walk, staring outside a window, stuff like that. Because giving your mind some peace helps you calm down and eventually relieve stress. And that's a good way to move to the third topic of this podcast, which is recovery. And I have found, because it is my hobby, that sports are a valuable thing for recovering from work or from study. And I dearly recommend everyone to find a a a hobby, because hobbies are such fun things, and joy in life helps you do the uneasy that or uh, not so nice things. And the one last thing that I want to say about recovery is that you should try to have the weekends for yourself, because that's that's how it has been for so long. 5 days of work and then 2 days rest. That helps you stay effective at work or studies, or in studies. And I think it's the best thing in general that you have a proper rest after a week, because if you're effective at work, it also motivates you. Now, however, there is a giant destructive elephant in the room, which is brain rot and social media that we unfortunately cannot avoid. The countries all around the world have failed, in my opinion, in regulating social media and the short form content, because there are so many people addicted to social media, and I am also one of those people. I am very, very prone to doom scrolling and brain rotting, and I feel like in many people's life, and people agreed on this in the small group discussion, brain rot has destroyed peace in our life. And by peace, I mean those kind of idle moments in life where you don't you don't do anything and you just kind of sit there and think about life, think about meaning, think about important questions. What makes me happy? What do I want to achieve in life? Those are not easy questions, and it's easier to never ask those questions and just pick up your phone and start scrolling. And it is depressing. However, I'd like to remind that, and just like Howtown in the science video explained, and this comes as a surprise to many people listening to this podcast, social media and brain rotting doesn't necessarily destroy your attention span. And if it destroys it, it doesn't destroy it so badly as we think. And one thing that I also want to say about doom scrolling is and attention. The one very important thing that I want you to remember is that there is a saying called, nowadays our attention span is shorter than the one of goldfish, and that's a lie. That used to be in a Microsoft report which had no proper sources. And finally, to move to the tools on how to keep your mental health intact and thereby your health intact, I want to say that attention, because there are people in the podcast, in listening to this podcast, that are concerned of their attention. Guys, you need to remember that attention comprises three things: your ability to focus, the environment you're focusing in, and third, your motivation for the task. Keep this in mind because, for example, if you are if you have had a good break, such as dinner at the university premises, and then you're going home and you're off to metro, and you somehow have a spark of motivation and you want to study in the metro, it still might not be possible because it's too crowded, or there are drunks because it's late at night, or something like that. So keep in mind, attention, even though we feel like it is destroyed, attention is three things: the ability to focus, environment, and motivation. And with that, I want to move on to the tools on how to improve discipline, which then improves your ability to focus, and the kind of process in it. So there is external discipline and inner discipline. Inner discipline is more difficult to combat because inner discipline means motivation. And to find motivation for your daily tasks, or let's say your major, you need to do some soul searching, honestly. And that's difficult. But if you're and by the way, now I see that I have very little time and it's going overtime, but I want to finish this thing. So there are ways to increase discipline externally. For example, just like Arpi Park said, don't stay at home, go to university, study somewhere else than where you usually live. Use tools, digital tools that cut out the notifications and cut out the noise. Or if you're not able to do that, then leave your phone away from the place where you're studying. And finally, think about the money. This will increase discipline. If you think about, and if you really think about how valuable is your time, do some calculations based off future career or something, and count how much 1 hour of effective studying costs, or is how much it gets you paid. But these things, these tools and their usage and finding motivations is not easy, and you need to take baby steps. So don't expect to study 4 hours straight and then lunch and then 4 hours straight tomorrow. Don't expect that. Expect to study maybe max 30 minutes at a one time tomorrow, and and don't be depressed if currently you feel like your attention span is too short. Everyone has that problem. And finally, I am sorry for going over time, but I want to say that health encompasses mental health too, and you should take care of it. Once you lose your health, it's very difficult to get it back, and sometimes you're not even able to going to get it back. So thank you, take care, bye.